implications of this Cascadia Innovation Corridor in the context of life sciences, and what does it mean for life sciences on both sides of the border? So first I'm going to start with a question that's addressed to all of you, so whoever feels comfortable in piping up first, feel free to. Would the marketing of a branded Cascadia Innovation Corridor attract more global talent and capital to the region? Would it attract more life science companies looking for places to do research and development and manufacturing?
I think absolutely. One of the things that we've been struck with in Vancouver is just, if you look globally, there are places with deeper research, there are places with deeper pockets. What we have to become good at is deeper collaboration, and I think the opportunity is, as Brad laid out, it's right in front of us. So I think there's a huge opportunity with that. We're also, I think, going through, in the next number of years, we're going through a profound change in terms of where medicine is going from, what became kind of the youngest science back when, Lewis Thomas quoted the term, in the 1930s. I think we're going through a fundamental change like that with personalized medicine. So, the opportunity to collaborate in an innovative ecosystem has never been, it's never been a stronger or more realistic opportunity.
Great. Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree. I think that there's a great opportunity there, and I think it's even more important it's branding the corridor, but it's really talking about what are the strengths of this region, what makes it special and unique. And I think, other parts in the U.S. are very domestically focused, and so it's such an amazing opportunity to talk about inter-country collaboration, cross-border collaboration, especially with the trade industry that we have here. So I think it's incredibly unique and a way to really focus on what the strengths have become.
I'd certainly agree with all of that. At Frazier, I like to think we invest in people and ideas. And the goal, which we shouldn't lose sight of, at least from my part of it, which is primarily drug translation, is to bring forward truly innovative new medicines in the most time and capital efficient way, and then, key point, deliver them to the people who would most benefit from them. So none of that actually has a geographic boundary. I can say categorically it's irrelevant to us whether we're investing in Canada, Holland, wherever, and we have investments in Canada now as well as here. So the attraction then comes back to people. And if we can brand that cross-border collaboration as leveraging human capital that's really diverse, I think that would be an attractive element for us for investment here.
Thanks, Michael. Second question, can life science and healthcare innovation be accomplished faster, cheaper, or more effectively, or in some cases at all, due to enhanced cross-border collaboration? Linked to that, what barriers might exist now that could be reduced or eliminated by closer ties between BC and the Pacific Northwest? It's a loaded question. Do you want to start this time?
Transportation, I think, is one. I'm typically each week for one of the companies I'm involved with, I'm on a WebEx, usually Monday night because of the time differences, and we have 3 to 4 different countries and maybe 6 sites in the United States and elsewhere. And that's great. The capacity to do that sort of virtual company in drug discovery and development is much different than it was 20 years ago when I started, or 30, dating myself. But there's still no substitute for face-to-face contact. And anything we could do to enhance the capacity to get together quickly and efficiently, as Brad mentioned, would be, I think, a big positive.
Especially for investors who want to be close to their companies.
Well, it's a pain. If you only have so many managing partners and only have so many people to take active board seats, right? And I'd much rather get on a train and go to Vancouver than get on a plane and fly to Cambridge. It's just a reality.
Sure. I would say that, a lot of the companies that we work early on that are in the early stages, and we're pretty focused on healthcare IT and technology-enabled services. One of those initial questions is, does it work? And so if you can prove that it works somewhere in a population of patients, then that to us is proof, and we figure out how to make it work in our vast health system. I think our health system, since we span from West Texas all the way up to Alaska, we're pretty much very reflective of the rest of the U.S. healthcare ecosystem. But the clinical issues that our patients face are, like Michael said, there's no geography there. It's very similar in Canada. So I think doing experiments in another country and just showing that it works is, if you can do that faster somewhere else, I think then, we'll of course be very interested in that.
I think another aspect of this is in innovation, collisions are important, right? And exchange of perspectives. So I run an innovation program where we bring startups through a program looking at the forces affecting startups. And we bring them together with the enterprise because, digital, and predominantly digital health, the digital health startups, they're super focused, AI plus genomics, there's my big idea.
Right.
There's a few more forces at play, but they know so much about those forces that are moving so quickly, that sharing perspective with the enterprise who understand a few more regulatory, privacy, those types of concerns or those type of forces, that exchange really works. One of the opportunities going cross-border when you're so close is the perspectives are really quite different between Canada and the US. Our healthcare systems are really different. The biology is not different. The DNA is not significantly different. It's different systems and these other forces. So having the collision to understand those forces better, having the collisions to actually get new perspectives so that you can look and say, we do that, why? And why can't we do this? I think that's really important in innovation. And when you're this close, I think that's just such an opportunity.
Excellent, thank you. Another question to all of you. In addition to high-speed rail connectivity, what infrastructure investments or public policies do you feel might be needed on either side of the border to support a vibrant, mutually beneficial healthcare and life science innovation corridor? So the policies, regulations, or transportation. We already heard a lot about transportation, so perhaps some of the thoughts on the regulatory environment and what maybe public policy in terms of investment, tax credits, and things like that.
I'm just going to triple down on transportation. I mean,
Sure.
Honestly, especially public transportation, and as more people come in, the movement of people face-to-face, to get that face-to-face content it's critically important. And if you look at other major metropolitan areas in the United States, I mean, they're far and away much more advanced in public transportation. I think it's going to be a critical problem for Seattle as we grow and we grow and we grow.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think it's about getting, if you can get the people together in a room, a lot can happen, and it's amazing. So I live, I can see the Peace Arch from my bedroom window, right? So I live very close to the border. Even with the traffic, it was about 2 hours. But it's the border problem, right? And so having people being able to freely cross the border, and that's a challenge, obviously, in the current environment. And so that's probably another piece to this, because I was looking at the train coming through, and I was thinking about, it's 57 minutes to go from Seattle to Seattle, but it'll probably be about 57 minutes at the border while they, inspect you for fruit and vegetables, right? So there are a few other things that we have to do, but it is still about connecting people.
So I'll probably go down, since that's been flogged, I'll probably go down to a slightly different, very different tack. And I don't know whether this is so much public policy per se. We will get to drug approval and personalized medicine and all that, but because it interfaces with our very disparate healthcare systems. But in my role as an advisor to the University of Washington and also the Benaroya and some other nonprofits, I quite often see people that have good ideas, but they lack two things. The first is capital. And quite frankly, from a VC perspective, they're usually the proverbial too early. They haven't been de-risked enough. We just don't know enough. And they may access maybe 50K or something like that when they really need 2 to 4 million to get it to a point where a Frazier or some quote real venture firm would put the money in. So I'd personally like to see a public initiative, and this spans the border because I imagine you have similar concerns, not unlike what's occurred in Texas, to some extent in California, RTP, even down in Florida under Jeb Bush. You know, you're always asking for money, but frankly, it's needed. If we had a larger sort of discretionary capital fund that could help move projects from the early phase to more translational phase, I think that would have a big impact. But it's not just money. If I had $1 billion and I threw it at UW or UBC, I'm afraid my biggest fear would be it would just be dispersed and be viewed as some, you know, another MRC or NIH grant. It needs to be qualitatively different. In order for that to happen, they need advice. They don't just need money. They need advice from people who are in the forefront of patient care and folks, quite frankly, who have been through the wars of drug discovery and development and know the reality of that. So that's two parts. And the third thing is really, I might call it public policy. And that's actually education, but not in STEM per se. I think we're doing a pretty good job of educating people in technology and medicine and, you know, scientific discovery. The deficit that I see most of the time is in the capacity of those people to communicate. They may understand how to program or, you know, run that gel or whatever, but they don't necessarily know how to tell other people why what they're doing is important. And that, of course, eventually affects public policy because, you know, if we had a more informed electorate vis-a-vis science and discovery, we'd probably have a better political situation than the one we currently have. So anyway, that's my 50 cents.
That's excellent. Christiana, perhaps I'll move to you. As a strategic investor, Providence Venture invests in companies whose interests are aligned with the innovation priorities of Providence St. Joseph Health, which in turn reflect the priorities of the U.S. healthcare system overall. Can you speak to what some of those priorities or those challenges, those problems that you're trying to solve in terms of healthcare problems here in the U.S.?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, one of the biggest issues that we're facing as a large healthcare system, and we're a mission-based organization, so anyone that comes to our front door will receive care. We're getting killed on Medicaid, and if you follow politics, which as painful as it is, it ain't gonna get any better. It's gonna get worse. And so we really have to see the Medicaid population as frankly, us being at risk for that population, because we get paid a third of what it costs us to deliver care to those patients. Often, that when they first step into our doors, they are very, very sick. And so we need to move upstream. We need to figure out how to deliver care more cheaply. And we just need to do a better job with that population all around. And I mean, that's not to say that you deliver care differently to that population. I think when you start and you figure out how to deliver care better to that population, it's going to scale across the rest of your system. But that is a very critical problem that we're facing right now as a large healthcare system. And I would say it reflects the rest of U.S. healthcare as well. And like I said, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
So what kind of companies does Providence invest in? Is it mainly health IT, and what areas of health IT?
Right. So I would say that, you know, what we're really looking for are, and the sweet spot is health IT and tech-enabled services. Health IT being those platform systems that enable us to do a better job of taking care of our patients and helping our providers, really. Our providers, as you probably, anybody knows, you go in and you see a healthcare provider, they're limited to 12 minutes to see you, they're squashed for time, they have very little resources, and they're being asked to do a lot more with a lot less. On the tech-enabled services side, it's really about how can we deliver care at scale and use technology, leverage technology to drive efficiencies. There are many, many things that can be done really well in person, face-to-face. It's just really hard to deliver a lot of care that way. So those things that can help us scale.
Last follow-up question. Does Providence, is it open to investing in startups on the other side of the border as well, or is it just limited to local?
Yeah, no, I mean, we will look at companies across, we haven't done any investments outside of the U.S.
We'll talk
right now. But I think that it really is about going back to, does it work? How is it going to help us? And then the third piece is, as a strategic investor, what we really bring to the table is the ability to scale. And so as a group of 5 people who are part of the fund, our commitment is that when we make that investment, we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to help get it done and help scale it across the health system, and not only our own health system, but across the rest of U.S. healthcare, because we really see ourselves as pretty reflective of the very complex mess that is the healthcare system.
Perfect. If you don't, yeah, I was going to say, can you talk about, on the flip side, Telus Health, your investment that you make, and what are kind of some of the problems you're trying to solve in the healthcare?
Sure. I was just going to say, with Providence, I mean, one of the barriers in digital health is not actually, there's some capital issues, but often it's not really the capital issues. It's just getting access to providers and patients, right? And so that's a big barrier we see in with our Canadian startups. A lot of them have great technologies, and they quickly look south because there's just more. The benefit of a fragmented healthcare system is there's more avenues for disruption. In Canada, we don't have a fragmented system. We've got provincial single payer system, but it's just harder to get in the front door. One of the things that excites me and what we're looking at with Telus is that Telus, first thing, like when they bought my company, I had to explain to all the docs that I'd sold an EMR to that why the phone company was buying their EMR. And so part of it is, we have a strategy that healthcare really needs, interoperability, needs communication, it needs data services. And, so we went out and we got reach across the healthcare system. So half the doctors in Canada use our electronic medical record systems. Half the pharmacists use our pharmacy systems. So finally, 10, 15 years after the U.S. has e-prescribing, we're finally going to do e-prescribing in Canada. But that's what it took. It took a private company to get in and say, we're gonna get this and make this happen. And so when we look at that, where we're trying to go is we're trying to shift to a platform whereby, ultimately it's patients seeking solutions for their health problems or their health jobs, and they seek them from providers, and using technology to streamline that. We think that digital health and virtual care could probably take a footprint of a hospital and shrink it by 50 to 70%. And the Dutch think it's 70%. I don't think we're that aggressive. But we're building a new hospital in downtown Vancouver that's smaller than the current hospital. It really pisses a lot of people off, and they think it's wrong, and I think it's the government cutting back. But it's going to open in 2022. It should be digital, right? Like, why should you have to come in for some things, right? There's some things you absolutely do have to come in for.
You're building innovation into that hospital from ground zero.
Exactly, right? And that's what you have to do. And so it's a long journey with digitizing the healthcare system. And to date, like a lot of my colleagues, as physicians go, like, God, this was what we did it for. Like it feels brutal. We feel like we're clerks. But once you're digital, then you can start layering things on top of it, and that's a real opportunity for startups.
And well, we've all had the experience of talking to 5 people before we finally get to the doc, right? That just says inefficiency. But it seems like you're also laying the groundwork for what's going to happen, which is personalized medicine. And we're already beginning to see some of the impacts of that. I see it on the drug discovery side. Example would be Merck's use of the PD-L1 marker to stratify lung cancer patients in their most recent trial. We've got midostaurin with FLT3 mutations and so on. I mean, not everything's BRCA1, which is Mary Claire Canyon-Town's discovery. I mean, it's not that discrete. As I'm seeing with the Benaroya, some of the work that folks like Eric Wambre and Jane Buckner are doing there, it's basically big data cluster analysis, and you're starting to be able to stratify patients who, might respond better or not as well to a particular drug. As we all know, they all have toxicities, so why give it to people who are not going to benefit from it? And then, another Seattle connection would be with Hopkins, actually, and with Adaptive. Drew Partle, a friend of mine down there, is looking at how to pick out patients who would not benefit from the combination of an anti-PD-1 and a CTLA-4 combination, because that has significant toxicity. So you're beginning to see all that. It hasn't, in my view, it's not crisp enough yet that you're actually going to make individual patient decisions, but that's coming. And your ability to implement that is going to be much facilitated by having a digital care facility that's designed to do it from the get-go.
And I think the other piece of it is, and this is a great opportunity that we were talking about before, is the payers are so far behind what's enabled by new technology and new drug discovery, and so proving out the economic benefit
Who's going to pay for
of
these?
avoiding the first line, the second line, the third line that doesn't work,
Well,
which is really hard to do, but you got to get the payers up and running.
Well, you know, even on the large pharma side of things, when I started 25, 30 years ago, if you, the idea that you would stratify patients to, you know, really get a label that was only for the patients where it was most likely to work, the marketing folks hated that, right? Because they want the biggest label they can get, and they would resist it. But frankly, because we have so many failures in drug trials, I think they finally recognized that the overall benefit was better for them to be able to design trials that work, so they didn't blow, you know, $500 million or $800 million. I know one example of an $800 million check that Pfizer wrote and was dead loss. It's much better for them to run a trial that works and then not have as big a market.
Right.
One of the things we're looking at is actually, so on the frontier of personalized medicine, we think the first one to actually really get to the community is pharmacogenomics, right? And looking at polypharmacy. So 90 to 95% of us carry a variant that affects our drug metabolism. If any of you are on 3 drugs or more, you really should do a pharmacogenomic panel to understand whether you're metabolizing these drugs properly or safely. And you certainly should do it before you add another drug to the mix. When we took that, pharmacogenomics, which the evidence has been around for 10 years, right? It's not new. We took it through our innovation program, and it was really interesting what kind of came out at the end of it was 3 forces needed to converge in order to make this real. So the first was you really did need to have a digital platform, because you need, when you select the drug, you need to be able to understand how it interacts with all the other drugs. You need to be able to see what you should substitute. That needs to be at the point of care with all of your doctors. So often people on multiple drugs have multiple doctors. It needs to be at the point of care for your pharmacy. So there's a bit of complexity building the platform. Telus is pretty good at that. That's what we could do. The 2 other forces were really hard, right? So the second one was the reimbursement economics, right? Understanding, okay, if we pay $300 for this test and we pay for a bunch of services around this, how are we actually going to, save money downstream to pay for it? What's the return on investment? And then the third force, which falls behind that, is standard of care. And how do you get doctors and pharmacists to do this, especially if it's not being reimbursed? And so, you kind of got this Gordian knot of a problem that you start to tease apart. But what we discovered with that is we kind of looked and said, where is there de facto value-based care? Where are you on the hook for those bad outcomes? And if you can find out where you're on the hook for those bad outcomes, whether it's defined as value-based care or just is value-based care, where there's de facto value-based care, then those are places that you can start with this stuff. But and that's where I think the discussion kind of with different systems, often, you just identify where you can start picking at this problem and getting your payers to talk together, right?
Thanks, Brendan. I think we're gonna conclude the panel session. I encourage all of you to follow up directly one-on-one if you encounter them to probe in some of those differences between our healthcare systems. And if you're a health IT company or a biotech company, what is the difference between our 2 systems? And what should you know if you're a Canadian company trying to get into the Seattle market and vice versa? So thank you very much for participating.
Please join me in thanking Louis and the panel.